Thomas, do you know who comes to your house every Tuesday? I laughed at first, thought it was gossip. But that night, when the laughter in my living room wasn't mine, I realized silence would be my weapon. They say what you don't know can't hurt you. They're wrong. It can destroy you quietly. Hello there, my friend. My name's Thomas, and I'm glad you're here with me tonight. I've lived a long life, seen a lot of things, but nothing prepares you for betrayal that walks right through your own front door. So pull up a chair and listen close, because what happened next still chills me. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you because of your age? From the outside, my life looked steady. I was the quiet old man in apartment 4B, polite, predictable, always on time with my morning paper and evening walks. My wife, Margaret, was known in the building for her charm. She had a way of lighting up a room, always smiling, always dressed just right. People would say, "You two are what love looks like after the storm." I used to believe them. We'd been married for over 30 years. Through sickness, loss, and the kind of struggles only time can teach you to endure, we'd built something I thought was unshakable. Our son lived across the country with his family, so most days it was just the two of us, sharing meals, watching the news, laughing about how fast the world was changing. I thought we were content. Then there was Mrs. Callahan, my neighbor from down the hall. She'd lived in the building even longer than I had. Sharp as a knife, that woman, but kind. Always checking in on everyone, keeping the place running like a small community. She wasn't one for gossip, which made her question that day in the elevator cut a little deeper. From the outside, people saw stability, an aging couple growing old together, surrounded by familiarity and peace. But inside, cracks had already started to form. I just couldn't see them yet. Margaret had grown distant, always busy, always on her way somewhere. Tuesdays were her errand days, or so she said. She'd leave before lunch and return with bags full of groceries or stories about her sister's health, sometimes even a faint scent of perfume I didn't recognize. I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing. After all, when you've shared a lifetime with someone, trust becomes second nature, like breathing. But even the deepest trust can start to feel like denial when something doesn't sit right. And as I replayed Mrs. Callahan's words in my head, I began to wonder if maybe I hadn't been paying attention. Looking back now, it's almost strange how normal those days felt. We'd sit on the balcony at night, drinking tea, pretending nothing had changed. But there was something behind her eyes, a kind of distance, as if she were already somewhere else. I just didn't know where, or with whom. There was a time when everything I did was for her. Back when life was simpler, when every dollar had to stretch and love meant work, not words. We met in our 20s, long before I had anything to my name. I was just a mechanic with oil-stained hands and a dream of owning a small home someday. She was a secretary at the local post office, quick with a smile, clever with numbers, and the kind of woman who could make a man feel like the world wasn't as heavy as it seemed. We didn't have much, but we built our life piece by piece. I remember working double shifts just to afford the down payment on the apartment we live in now. Every corner of that place carries a story. The dent on the kitchen counter from when we dropped the wedding cake, the faded spot on the living room floor where the sun used to hit our first couch. Even the old clock hanging by the door has meaning. It was a wedding gift from her father. It's the same clock I'd later use to hide the camera. Funny how something meant to mark our time together ended up exposing how time had changed us. I gave her everything I could: stability, loyalty, years of my life spent trying to make her happy. When our son was born, I worked 6 days a week to pay for his school. And when she said she wanted to stop working and focus on family, I agreed without hesitation. We struggled, yes, but we made it through every rough patch hand in hand. At least, that's what I thought. I sold my father's land, the last piece of my childhood home, just to pay off the mortgage and keep her from worrying about money. That land meant something to me. It was where I learned hard work, where my father taught me what it meant to keep your word. Letting it go felt like letting go of a part of myself, but I did it for peace, for love. And now, when I think about that sacrifice, the land, the years, the dreams I gave up, and picture her standing in our living room with another man, it hits deeper than just betrayal. It feels like I traded my life for a lie. Every corner of this home, every inch of what we built, became a reminder that love can rot quietly, even while the walls still stand. That apartment was supposed to be our forever place, the symbol of what we'd built through hard times and shared faith. Now, it's the crime scene of a love that died in silence. It started small, the kind of moment most people would brush off. One night, I came home early from the hardware store. Margaret was on the phone, her back to me, laughing softly. When she realized I'd walked in, her voice shifted. She hung up too quickly, too carefully. I tried not to read into it. I asked who it was, and she smiled, that tired smile she'd been wearing more often lately. "Oh, just Susan," she said. "You wouldn't know her." But something in her tone wasn't right. It wasn't the words. It was how light she sounded before she saw me, and how heavy she became after. Still, I forced a smile. I wanted to believe her. Later that night, as we ate dinner, she said something that stayed with me. I was talking about fixing the sink, and she interrupted, almost laughing. "You know, Tom, you don't have to do everything yourself anymore. Not everything's about proving you're still capable." It wasn't cruel on the surface, but it landed like a slap I wasn't supposed to feel. She went back to her meal, humming softly, not even realizing what she'd just said, or maybe realizing exactly. I stayed quiet, chewed my food slowly, but inside, I felt something twist. That small comment, proving you're still capable, sank deep. After decades of carrying this family, of keeping her warm, fed, and safe, I was suddenly being measured by what I could or couldn't still do. I told myself not to take it personally. Age changes people, right? But the truth is, words like that don't fade. They settle somewhere inside you. I washed the dishes that night in silence, my hands shaking just enough to betray what I was feeling. And while she watched television, I sat on the balcony with my coffee, staring at the city lights, replaying her voice in my head. I didn't argue, didn't raise my tone, but I remembered every word. Because sometimes the smallest cut is the one that starts the bleeding you can't stop later. After that night, things began to shift. Not all at once, but in quiet, unsettling ways that only someone who's lived long enough learns to notice. Margaret started moving through the house like a guest, not a wife. Her laughter became private. Her phone calls shorter around me, but longer when she thought I was out of earshot. I'd walk into a room, and she'd end a conversation mid-sentence. When I'd ask who it was, she'd smile and say, "You wouldn't care, Tom. It's just one of the ladies from church." The first real test came at dinner with a few neighbors. We were sitting around the table, plates full, when someone mentioned retirement plans. I said I'd been thinking about selling one of our smaller properties, a cabin I'd bought years ago, back when things were better. Before I could finish, she cut me off. "He keeps calling it our property," she said, half laughing. "But he bought that place long before I came along. I've told him, if it's up to me, I'd sell it tomorrow and finally take a real vacation." Everyone laughed politely. I did too, because what else could I do? But inside, it felt like something cracked. She'd never talked about our home like that, as if it were hers to decide. I didn't say a word, just sipped my drink, feeling the eyes in the room shift toward me with that uncomfortable pity people give when they sense something isn't right. The next week, I found her in my study, looking through old files. "Just trying to organize your mess," she said, barely glancing up. But I noticed she wasn't touching the clutter. She was opening drawers I hadn't touched in years, the ones with our deeds, wills, and financial papers. When I asked what she was doing, she shrugged. "You should have shown me these years ago. If something ever happened to you, I wouldn't even know what you own." The way she said it, like she'd already thought about that possibility, made my stomach turn. She began correcting me in front of others, tiny remarks that stripped the air of warmth. "You're forgetting things again, Tom," or "You already told that story." Harmless on the surface, but sharp enough to cut. And every time I smiled and nodded, swallowing the sting, because arguing would only make me look foolish. But the real betrayal came one Tuesday when she told me she was going to her sister's again. I'd seen her pack a dress she hadn't worn in years, perfume she never used for errands. I asked her if she wanted me to drive her. She declined too quickly. "You don't need to bother, Tom. Enjoy your rest." I stood at the window, Watching her step into a cab instead of her sister's old sedan, something cold settled in my chest. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just distance. It was deceit. Still, I stayed silent. I went about my days pretending not to notice, all while the pieces started fitting together. Her new perfume, her phone habits, her sudden interest in our assets. And every Tuesday, the apartment seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something I couldn't yet see. I didn't confront her. Not then. I just let her think I was slipping. That old Thomas was too tired to notice what was happening right under his roof. Because sometimes before you strike back, you have to let them believe they've already won. I tried to ignore the signs at first, but the truth has a way of whispering louder when you try to silence it. One afternoon, I came home early from a doctor's appointment. Her purse was on the counter, and beside it lay an envelope, unsealed, with a bank's logo I didn't recognize. Inside were transfer receipts, money leaving our joint account in small amounts, regular as clockwork, every Tuesday. I asked her about it that evening. She didn't flinch. "Bills," she said flatly. "You don't keep up with them anymore." I wanted to believe her, but my hands trembled as I folded the paper back into the envelope. I'd balanced our finances for decades. I knew every bill, every payment. These weren't bills. These were withdrawals. Deliberate, quiet ones. Then came the phone calls. I'd walk into the kitchen and hear a man's voice cut off mid-laugh. "Who's that?" I'd ask, pretending not to care. She'd say, "Telemarketers, they never stop calling." But I noticed how she'd only get those calls on Tuesdays. Mrs. Callahan started avoiding eye contact when we passed in the hallway. That's when I realized she must have seen something. Once, I heard her door close just as mine opened, like she didn't want to be caught watching. I checked the mail one morning and found a notice from our insurance company addressed only to Margaret, a change in beneficiary form. I wasn't listed anymore. I stared at that piece of paper, my chest tight, my heart pounding with a dread I hadn't felt in years. She was changing things quietly, shifting control, rewriting the map of our life without telling me. At night, she'd stay out later. Bible study ran long, she'd say, but she'd come home smelling of wine, her makeup too perfect for prayer. And every Tuesday, the pattern repeated. The same lie, the same perfume, the same silence that dared me to question her. That's when I started keeping a notebook. Dates, times, details. I didn't plan revenge yet. I just needed truth I could hold. Because in my gut, I knew something was coming. Something I couldn't unsee once I found it. I started checking the old clock near the door, the same one from our wedding. Every time I looked at it, it felt like it was watching her too. Tick by tick, that clock became my silent witness. I didn't know it yet, but soon it would capture everything. I'd spent enough years fixing engines to know how to find what others tried to hide. So when the whispers and the missing money became too much to ignore, I decided to stop guessing and start watching. One Friday morning, while she was out, I climbed a chair and took down the old wall clock. The same one we got as a wedding gift. The one that had ticked through every joy and argument and quiet morning coffee. And behind its face, I placed a tiny camera I'd ordered online, small enough to disappear, sharp enough to see everything. I tested it twice, made sure the angle caught the front door, the couch, and the dining table. Then I waited. Tuesday came, and as usual, she left for her errands, her perfume hanging in the air like a lie that had grown too confident. I sat in the cafe across the street, watching the live feed on my phone. An hour later, the door opened. My wife entered first, then a younger man followed. Dark hair, suit jacket off, easy smile, like he belonged there. She poured him wine, played our song from the speaker, and they danced where she and I had danced on our last anniversary. He kissed her neck, and she laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in months. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't rage. I simply watched as the truth unfolded in the living room I'd built with my own hands. They didn't see the camera, didn't sense that their secret was no longer theirs. When it ended, I shut my phone off, slipped it into my pocket, and walked home in silence. I didn't say a word to her that night, didn't mention the footage, didn't let my eyes betray what I knew. I kissed her forehead like I always did, wished her good night, and sat in the dark beside the clock that now held our truth. Because sometimes the smartest move isn't to confront a lie, it's to let it grow just long enough to hang itself. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a Sunday evening, and she'd invited a few friends over for dinner. A small gathering, or so she said. I sat at the head of the table like always, carving the roast while she poured wine and played the gracious host. The laughter was forced, the air thick with something I couldn't name but could feel. Halfway through the meal, one of the guests, a man I barely knew, leaned over and said, "Margaret tells us you're thinking of retiring completely, handing things over." I looked up, surprised. Handing what over? Margaret's smile tightened. "Oh, Tom, don't make a scene. We've been talking about simplifying, selling a few properties, downsizing. It's time to stop clinging to the past." Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. I could feel the challenge behind them. The table fell quiet. I could tell she wanted me to argue, to look like the stubborn old fool who couldn't let go. But I didn't. I just set down my fork, folded my napkin, and met her gaze. "You're right," I said calmly. "It's time to let go of a few things." The room relaxed. She took it as victory, flashing that quick smile of hers before raising her glass. But deep inside, my decision had already been made. Not to argue, not to plead, but to prepare. After the guests left, she started again. "You embarrassed me," she said coldly. "You make people think I'm some kind of gold digger when all I'm trying to do is manage what's left of your mess." I stood there quietly, letting her words pass through me. I'd spent a lifetime fixing what others broke. I didn't need to fix this. Not anymore. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said softly. "But I think things will be clearer soon." She scoffed, turning away. "You never say what you mean, Tom. You just sit there, pretending you're wiser than everyone else." Maybe I was, or maybe I just learned that storms destroy themselves faster when you don't stand in their path. That night, as she slept, I sat in my study watching the footage again, not out of anger, but to remind myself why silence was necessary. Because sometimes, the calmest man in the room is the one who already knows how the story ends. The first reveal came quietly, like most truths do. It was the following Tuesday, the same day she always disappeared for her so-called errands. But this time, when she came home, I was waiting in the living room, sitting by that same old clock that had seen too much. She froze when she saw me, not because she was surprised I was there, but because of what was sitting on the table between us. A single envelope. Unmarked. Closed. She tried to play it off. "What's this, Tom?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes flickering. I leaned back in the chair. "Something I found while organizing our files. It's amazing the things people leave lying around when they think no one's looking." She stared at me for a moment, then reached for the envelope. I didn't stop her. Inside was a printed still frame, one single photo from the hidden footage. It showed her standing in our living room, wineglass in hand, her so-called errand partner smiling behind her. Her face drained of color. She looked at me, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "Where did you get this?" she finally whispered. "I've always been good with my hands," I said quietly. "You'd be amazed what a little maintenance around the house can uncover." For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, fear, maybe even shame, but just as quickly, she buried it under anger. "You've been spying on me?" she hissed. "How dare you invade my privacy?" I smiled slightly. "Funny thing, privacy. Hard to lose what you've already given away." She slammed the photo down on the table, breathing fast. "You're losing your mind," she snapped. "This means nothing. That's just a friend." I nodded slowly. "Of course. I never said it wasn't." And that was it. I didn't push, I didn't argue. I just let the silence do what it always does, dig deeper than any accusation could. She stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the old clock rattled on the wall. I stayed where I was, calm, still, letting the sound fade into quiet. Because I hadn't shown her everything, not yet. That photo was only a fraction of what I had. And sometimes showing just enough truth is the best way to let a liar trap themselves in the rest. A week later, I invited her to the lawyer's office. She thought it was about the property sale, walked in confident, smiling. Then the lawyer pressed play. The hidden camera footage every Tuesday, every lie. Her face drained as the room filled with her own laughter. The lawyer slid another folder across the desk. The updated will. Everything in my name. She wasn't on it anymore. She tried to speak but couldn't. For once, silence belonged to her. The room went still. She stared at the papers, her lips trembling, the reality settling in heavier than any argument could. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, I just wanted to know the truth. The lawyer nodded quietly. She gathered her purse, her pride shattered, and walked out without looking back. Peace returned, not through revenge, but through truth finally laid bare. In the end, I learned that patience is louder than anger, and truth needs no defense. Respect, once broken, can't be bought back, but peace. Peace comes when you stop fighting for someone who's already chosen to betray you. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Thank you, my friend, for staying with me through this story. Betrayal isn't easy to face, but sometimes sharing it helps us all heal a little. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed silent when the truth finally spoke for itself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe, share this story, and check the channel for more tales like this. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, stay blessed.